Testing, testing. Can you hear me now? Hi. Sorry about the audio issue. I was kind of thinking there were probably going to be some bugs. Hopefully you can hear me now. I'll wait to get confirmation on that before I continue talking. Oh. Hi. Okay, good. I was thinking there were probably going to be some bugs because I just updated my computer to Windows 11, so, new operating system means new bugs. No, not quite yet. I don't think I really have any plans to get much in the way of new equipment, really. But yeah, just new operating system. Bubby, hey, come here. What? He ran away. I'm trying to show him his new equipment, his new bed. He's not quite used to it yet. Come here. What? That was strange. There, Vic. You want a treat? I'll bring it over here and maybe. Yep, this was a present from my brother. When I'm standing up, it's about this high on me. It's standing on the ground right now. So, it's definitely a tall dino. Big boy. Anyways, while you couldn't hear me because my microphone wasn't connected properly, I was saying I'm sorry we didn't get to see you more closer to Christmas. But oh, here he comes back. You want a treat? Yeah, this bed's for you. Come on in. Up. Can you come up? No, he's too nervous. You want another treat? I think he's also a little nervous about the dino. Just what everyone wants and needs. Yeah, it's on the one hand, I do think it's kind of cool, but on the other hand, it's a giant dinosaur. So I'm just gonna send a message to the Sharkies because there might be confusion about whether I was doing this tonight or not. You can go on in. It makes you chuckle. Yeah. Yeah, it's probably for the best that we didn't really come to visit, but maybe if I put his bed over there. He does like to hang out over in this direction. Go, Ben. Ben. Come here. No. Well, maybe he'll figure it out later. Might just need to give him some treats and encourage him to use it. Farmhouse is using 2 Christmas presents right now. One from parents, one from self. What's the second present? Yeah, what 2 presents? Okay, give me a little space, Dino. The bow tie, the ribbon, did not come with the dino. That got attached later. That's for you. He's checking it out, but I think he's not certain about it yet. Oh, you're using the phone holder right now? Guess this is a good time for it. As he lays down outside the bed. Where he's kind of obscured by a box. Oh no. I did a little Christmas, well, Boxing Day shopping for myself. Why does the screen turn off when I pick this up? Well, got myself a shiny new laptop, tablet-y type thing. The carpet guy put foam down today, and Ember is very... oh, no. But it's got... you can fold it in half so that you can use it as like a tablet. She spent a lot of time crying on the foam. Oh, there's the screen. I don't know why I did that, but check it out. Yeah, it's fancy. I can do this. Oh, and the screen flips. Good, good. Yeah, I figured I kind of wanted something like this. For the purposes of like, anytime I don't want to be sitting at the computer. I also thought it would be useful for tabletop stuff over in the other room, things like that, and on the go type things as well. So I am looking forward to playing with it. It's Windows 11, which is a little new to me, but I don't think there's too much different. I don't know. I'm not really. I need to look up a list of like what's new with Windows 11 compared to Windows 10. But it's pretty cool, and it came with its own stylus, which is charging right now, because it can be used in tablet mode, and so it's got a fancy electronic stylus. Let's see whether the Sharkies replied. No. I hope everything's okay with them. Because we did talk about this last week. Restarting. But that we'd be doing this tonight. It is pretty big, but I mean it's it's a multifunction thing, and it kind of functions also as its own stand. But yeah, it's not quite handheld, I suppose. It is gonna need to like rest on a surface. So I guess it's a little bit more on the laptop side of things than the tablet side of things. You want a snake? Yeah, you can go in there. Good puppy. That's for you. That's a bed for you. Yeah, that's for you. We just picked that up for him today as well, so that's why he's not used to the bed yet. So how's Erica doing? Hopefully not too stressed out. But if you are, that's what it is. Did I want to break today? We'll see. We'll see. I don't know. I'll see whether or not they show up, and we'll decide after that. We can talk for a bit either way. You watched 9 episodes of Gundam Wing. All right. Just the original series? It's still very good. I have watched very little, like, consecutive Gundam episodes. I'm going to bring this down towards me a little instead of up at Dino. I'll bring him in too, though. The 1995 one. Is that the original series? Which series? That's not the original. The original Gundam, I guess Gundam Wing versus Gundam, right? So Gundam Wing is like one of the more modern ones-ish. I mean, 1995. I suppose is kind of, he's scratching at his food dish, but I don't know if there's anything left in there. Yeah, that makes much more sense. 1981 for the original, yeah, something like that. Yeah, I've caught episodes of Gundam Wing back when it was on TV, but I've never really, like, sat and watched a series of Gundam and, like, comprehended what was going on. Not really. I think I've tried with other people, but because, it was a group of people or whatever together, like with you guys or something, but because of the amount of people in one space, I think I didn't really focus on it very much. And so I don't think I really took in what was going on. Oh, oh, he's stepping in. Oh, and jumping over. Is gave you beautiful hand blown. Oh, yes, right. I saw a picture of one of those hand blown glasses. Pre ordered Rune Factory 5 and pants. It is really intense to follow. If you miss a scene, everything stops making sense. Yeah. Yeah, I feel like it's one of those shows that I would need to like really focus on and try not to get distracted. And also, I kind of wonder about modern television, current television programming, shows, and things like that versus sort of the early internet era where streaming wasn't so much of a thing. I wonder whether the format of shows is changing. Um, because like when I watched Dot Hack within the past couple of years, I found it really slow in comparison to modern stuff. And I'm wondering if that's because they weren't expecting you to watch the whole show at once. It was more intended for like a, you know, maybe like once a week format or something. And I wonder if streaming services has kind of changed the pacing of shows and things like that. It's also funny that the show wants its premise taken seriously when it's about colonies sending 5 children with nukes to Earth as their war effort. Yeah. Do they? I assume that they try to justify. The pace has changed. Dot Hack was, I don't know. It was still good. I watched the first series of it. I do think it was still good, especially like the soundtrack was very good for that show. Like the music was really cool, but it was so slow, and it was a lot of like people waiting around. Yeah, the nukes are Gundams. Yeah, the WMDs, weapons of mass destruction, right? Advanced weaponry, anyways. But yeah, Dot Hack I found was a lot of like people waiting around for other people. Characters waiting to talk to other characters. Maybe having kind of an inconsequential chit chat about something. Um, and then eventually an important event happens. Some plot point happens. And then everybody kind of goes around telling everyone else about the important plot point that happened, or like trying to find people so that they can talk about it and talk about what happened. And a lot of like searching and people near missing each other and just kind of wandering around and being, and then eventually they find each other and they talk about what happened, and then they talk about talking about what happened, and they tell other people that they told people about what happened, and then eventually something else happens, and then everybody kind of needs to go around and find it. Like it was just really slow and really like spaced out the important plot points. Pharma says, I would think streaming stuff would make older things feel shorter since they happened like once a week, so they wouldn't be expecting you to watch it all at once. Eric Kurtz talking about Dragon Ball Z. Dragon Ball Z. Um, yeah, I watched the abridged version of Dragon Ball Z. I found an abridged version of the show that I still think the Frieza, the Planet Namek saga part of that is really the worst for dragging the show out. It's got some cool parts in it. Goku going Super Saiyan for the first time is still iconic. Um, but I think there's beeping happening in the other room. Um, I don't know. It was okay. Parts of that show are more interesting than I remember them being. I think I kind of expect the show to be campy and bad. Um, but like the beginning of the Cell Saga was actually pretty interesting. There's a lot of neat ideas happening, more so than just get strong and hit each other. There's a lot of like, I don't know, figuring out what's going on and why things are changing, because you've got time travel happening and you've got characters coming from the future, and then you've got, because those characters came from the future, they're changing the timeline, and so things are happening differently than they expect. And I don't know, it was pretty good. I actually quite enjoyed the Cell Saga. I think I enjoyed the non-fighting parts of that more so than the actual fights, um, because it was, I don't know, more involved than I remembered it being. Still no reply from the Sharkies. Ericer says BRB. I hope everything is okay with them. And Ericer is back. I'm just trying to see. Looks like Christine was maybe online like an hour ago. I'll try sending her a message. He stopped at the stairs. Binnabik. Binnakegabinnik. Binnabon bean. Binnakegabon bean. I don't know why he's nervous about this bed. It's a bed, Bin. It's for you. Hmm. So yeah, Ericer mentioned her Christmas presents. Glasses, Rune Factory 5. Pants. Are they nice pants? Did you get really, really cool pants? Oh, oh, and over. And away. Come on, why am I all out of focus? I'm over here. Is it the lighting? Hey Google, set desk lights to warm white. Maybe it'll focus a little better. Although now the dinosaur is just glowing because it's right under the lights. Hmm. I hope everything's okay with the sharkies. We have leftovers and Christmas treats in our fridge. Yeah. Gotta have some of those treats. I'm a little hungry, actually. Erica! Erica, where'd you go? I want to know about your pants. I want to know if you have cool pants. Pants! Gold, Father! Gold! I feel like this was a pretty subdued Christmas for us. I mean, we did come out to Chilliwack and we went to my family on Christmas Day, but the snowstorm was happening, and so we kind of cut out earlier than we intended to. Um, we did not stay for dinner as was the plan. We instead went back to. Oh, had to take a couple of phone calls. I see. You had to take calls about store credit. Did you accept the offer? Was it a good offer, or were they trying to lowball you? I feel like even just store credit is by default kind of a lowball. These lights seem too bright. Hey Google, set desk lights to 50%.
Got it. Setting
Yeah, there we go. That's better. I'm sorry, I was yelling at you about pants while you were taking calls. Think it was decent? So tell me about these pants. I've been sitting here in eager anticipation to know about these pants that you got for Christmas. I really want to know. Are they good pants? Really, like, just nice pants? With these streams, I start recording when I start streaming. So I start the stream at, what was it, bulk rares. They are pants. Yeah, I start streaming at like 10 to 7 just to so it sends out the notifications, and then I actually open up the camera at 7 o'clock, and that's when I start streaming at 7 o'clock. But that means that I also start recording at that time, and so that I tend to record all of these conversations and things. But I'm kind of wondering if maybe I should only start recording when I start to read the book itself. Because I think, if anybody's watching these on YouTube, like I know Robot Kyo watches some of these on YouTube, and there's a few other people that have told me that they occasionally watch them on YouTube. And I don't know, that means that they've got to sit through or skip through the 15 to 20 minutes of just me chatting with everybody. I mean, today it's going to be longer than that because I don't know what's going on with the Sharkies. I've messaged them both on Messenger, and neither of them has I could edit video. You think I've got the time for video editing? I mean, I can just like reach over and click start recording when I pick up the book. In theory, that would be easier than editing it. I wonder. Oops, that's wrong. Sorry, as I sit here staring at my phone, I just want to make sure everything's okay with them. Like, it is okay if they are too busy, but I just want to make sure that it's not because of problems. Hopefully I've got the right phone number. Yeah, I'll see what Robokio's got to say about it. Um, ask around for some input. Which Zelda game are you going to play? Because I know we were kind of talking about that before, and I was vaguely maybe trying to sway you towards Skyward Sword, but it would also be good for you to finish Twilight Princess, right? That also, is a great game, one of my favorites. I'm not sure what my ordering of Zelda games is at this point. I don't think Breath of the Wild is my favorite game. I think Breath of the Wild was a good game, but I don't think that it's my favorite Legend of Zelda game necessarily right now. But like for a very long time, Link to the Past was my favorite Legend of Zelda game. Even past like Ocarina of Time, which I know took a lot of people's. Oh, I texted Sharky and he says, "Yep, we're doing okay. Oops, are we streaming?" Erica says Breath of the Wild is far from her favorite. Probably spent the most time on it. Yeah. It was a fun game. Like, it had some great exploration and things like that. Um, but because it was so different, it just doesn't fit the category quite right for me. Yeah, for a long time, Link to the Past was my favorite, and then I think Twilight Princess actually kind of pulled ahead of that for me. I just had a great time playing Twilight Princess. I thought it was just like Farmos is just saying right now. Um, and then I also really enjoyed Skyward Sword, but it might still go like for me. It might go Twilight Princess, Link to the Past, Skyward Sword, and then maybe Breath of the Wild under those. That's not. And I'm not including Link Between Worlds in that list because I was playing that game, but then our DS got stolen. Our 3DS got stolen that had the game on it. Oh, yeah. Wind Waker was also quite good. Wind Waker's not as memorable for me for some reason. I don't know what it is about it. I might need to replay Wind Waker. Um, mm, that's fair for Farmhouse, all the water stuff. And I didn't. Sailing the ship around was fun, but I also found it kind of just like sort of a time sink sort of thing, going back and forth between places in the boat, and there was just parts where you're just like, yep, this is water everywhere. And I mean, sure, if you're galloping through Hyrule Field, that's similar, but I still find that more interesting. I find galloping around on Epona more interesting than sailing around on empty water. Though they did pack a lot of stuff into the water, but there were still just lots of times where you're like, I'm just between islands right now, just water everywhere. Sharkies. No worries. And I'm sorry for like pestering you. I was just you guys haven't really missed a stream, and so when you weren't here, I was kind of worried that I don't know, maybe there was like car problems or something. So I just wanted to make sure that everything was okay. Like if you're gonna not be present, that's I don't expect it's not mandatory attendance. I wanted to make sure that everyone was healthy and okay. Yeah, Farmos started off the stream saying it's the limbo time between Christmas and New Year's where people lose track of the days. We were just talking about Legend of Zelda games with Erica. Erica, I have not played Majora's Mask, and we kind of already talked about that the last time we were talking about Zelda games, but it was the time limit thing for me. Um, when Majora's Mask came out, I was pretty adamant at that time that I did not like games that had time limits, and I'm aware that Majora's Mask um, isn't really a time limit, but that's how I viewed it at that time, and so I just didn't want to play it. Um, and so as a result, I have never played Majora's Mask. I'm not uh, the ultimate Legend of Zelda fan that's played every single game. Like there's lots of handheld editions, games that I haven't played as an example. Um, but I do think I've played most of the console ones. Eric saying Twilight Princess would have been higher on the list if the wolf parts weren't so stressful and tedious. Got Majora's Mask on 3DS. Maybe. I've got so many games to play right now, and I'd still rather replay both Skyward Sword and Breath of the Wild. I think before I go back to Majora's Mask because there was recently Nintendo actually had a sale, which is pretty rare, and so I got the Breath of the Wild DLC for like 30% off, which was actually a pretty decent price at that discount. And I've never played any of the DLC for that. And it's also, I haven't played Breath of the Wild since my first playthrough of it, pretty much at launch. Um, so I feel like it's been long enough now that maybe I can go back to it and play through on master mode or something with fresh eyes, or fresher. Mrs. Sharkey just played Majora's for the first time this past year. Really liked it, but couldn't have done it without a walkthrough. Pharma says it was hard. I thought, wait. Benedict, hey. What you doing? Did Farmos play Majora's Mask? I thought you said you hadn't played it. Was I mistaken? Did I read that wrong? Oh, wait, I might have missed you talking about it. Oh, Farmos never finished Majora's Mask. It was good, but kind of tedious to have to do things again and again. Okay. I gotcha. Yeah, I remember. I think you're one of the only people I know that actually played the DLC for Breath of the Wild, Ericer. Um, yeah, we got it for cheap, so I think I'd like to go back and play that. But I think before I do that, I'd like to replay Skyward Sword because it's been even longer since I played that. And Skyward Sword had a really good story. I think as far as story goes, Twilight Princess and Skyward Sword are my two favorites. I think they had the most interesting actual stories for Legend of Zelda games. Um, yeah, because Twilight Princess had all the stuff with like Midna and the Shadow Realm and things like that. That was all pretty neat, I thought. And Skyward Sword actually had like what felt like a real plot. I feel like a lot of Legend of Zelda games, they've got a story, but it's just there to hold all the temples and things that you're going to go through and do the adventuring. And I'm sure, Skyward Sword is that as well. But from what I remember of it, I actually enjoyed the story. There were characters that you like became familiar with and I was kind of mentioning this before, but there was actual character development in that game, which I feel like is pretty rare for a Legend of Zelda game. Usually I feel like the characters are pretty one-dimensional. Um, but I think that Skyward Sword actually had character development and some pretty tense moments in it, too. Sharky say Ocarina of Time will forever be my favorite, but Twilight Princess was pretty great, too. Yeah. And Farmo says, really like the dungeons in Twilight Princess, Skyward Sword, and Ocarina of Time. Yes. Uh, there were some dungeons in Twilight Princess that I had a great time in. That I was like, man, I just want to do that dungeon again because it was fun. Like, and I think Skyward Sword had some really pretty dungeons, some really neat designs, and like, I don't know, just good looking environments. Well, Breath of the Wild just almost didn't have any dungeons at all. The closest you got were the like beasts, the four beasts, and those had like little mini dungeons. And then other than that, I guess you had the like little temples, but those were more like a collection of puzzles that you just sort of did in an order and weren't. Yeah, I don't know. Yes, this the top thing. When I was thinking of fun dungeons, that was the first one that I was definitely thinking of. That like going along the rails on your spinning top thing was like that dungeon was a lot of fun. Erica can't judge Ocarina as a game in ranking with the others. But yeah, the top was a weird thing to be in a game. I feel like it was a strange concept, but just that dungeon was fun. Was just like wee. Almost says, "Oh man, was that boss ever hard?" The like floating skull thing, and you're spinning around the pillar and going upwards, and it's shooting fireballs at you. Uh, I wish that dungeon were like bigger, like there was more to it because it was a great time. Anyways, it's quarter to 8, so I think we're gonna read one chapter just real quick so that this counts as a book stream, huh? How's that sound to everybody? Farm was talking about the boss of the water temple of Twilight Princess. Trying to remember which one was which because of course there's so many water temples. What does everybody think about just getting through a chapter of this? We're on chapter 9. We're on page 108. Lucky 108. The number 108. Quick fun fact Sleet fact. The number 108 is one of my favorite numbers because of the Suikoden game series, specifically Suikoden 2, but I think that number applies to most of, if not all of the Suikoden games. I think it's I think it comes from Chinese uh, literature or something, the number. But in the Suikoden series, like in Suikoden 2, for example, the 108 Stars of Destiny, there are 108 characters that you can collect throughout the game. More or less. But roughly, that's what, yeah, Pharma says it's auspicious in some way. But yeah, and since that's one of my favorite games, especially from my childhood, um, I don't know, I've always liked that number as a result. Yeah, so where are we at? What just happened in this? They had the little. They spent some time in Durine. Our group of travelers spent some time in Durine. Garion went with Silk to visit some merchants while they were searching after whatever it is that they're searching after, because Garion does not know what they're hunting. Um, they encountered Asherak of Tholmergos. Or no, Asherak of Rakgoska. I think Asherak is from Rakgoska. Yes, Asherak of Rakgoska. They met Asherak of Rakgoska, who Garion recognized as the shadowy figure on horse that he has seen throughout his life, but he still did not feel the need to tell anybody about this fact. So, Garion has recognized Asherak, and presumably Asherak recognized Garion, but nobody else is in on that little secret just yet. Um, Farmos made the pumpkin soup from Twilight Princess. Yes, it was very good. It was not vegan. It had fish in it and presumably cream or something. Anyways, so they departed Doreen, and they came up with the excuse of going to get some hams to transport for one of the merchants. And Silk began teaching Garion the secret language of Drasnia, which is a sign language, which I think is pretty cool. Garion was getting some criticism and thought he was doing well, and then got some criticism and wasn't feeling so good about it. Being told not to use baby talk, and then he needs to that he needs to complete his phrases and things like that, and that he's got bad habits that he needs to stop doing. So then they went to get some hams, and while they were no, before they did that, while they were on their way to get hams, they stopped in at some little inn in some small town, and Garion recognized Brill, the farmhand in that town, who had given them some trouble in the past, back at Faldor's farm, and so they realized they are possibly being followed. Brill didn't see them there, and so they don't know for sure if Brill was there following them or for some other purpose. And Brill met with some other Sendarian who was wearing a sword and paid them some money. And wearing a sword in Sendaria is not illegal, but it is uncommon. So they ducked out of town quite early in the morning in an attempt to ditch Brill, and Garion went and had a little conversation with Silk while they tried to see whether or not they had been followed. And I thought that was quite an interesting conversation that they had. They talked about why they were on the road. Garion speculating that something had been stolen, something important, and that they were tracking that stolen item. And Mr. Wolf and Aunt Pole and the rest of them were trying to get it back. Silk confirmed that that much was true. Garion said, Mr. Wolf and Aunt Pole are not at all what they seem to be. Silk agreed with that. Garion noted that they can do things that other people can't do. Mr. Wolf can follow this thing, whatever it is, without seeing it. And last week in those woods, when the Murgos passed, they did something as if it was reaching out and putting his mind to sleep. And Silk said that Garion was very observant and that important things were happening, but would not reveal what it was that they were following or the name of the one that stole it, because there are some Murgos that can reach out and pick the thoughts right out of your mind. And then Silk dropped the bomb that Garion is not a Sendar. And Silk, who is trained to know what people are, could not figure out exactly what it was that Garion is. This kind of blew Garion's mind. And then, let's see. When Garion asked, is Aunt Pole a Sendar? And Silk said, of course not. Then Garion said, he's probably the same thing she is, because she's his father's sister after all. And Silk said, that's impossible. And then they went back to the wagons. So I thought that was quite the, I don't know, there was a lot of important bits of information there, which is why I spent some time reviewing it, despite the fact that we're starting very late. But yeah, and then the last thing that happened was they stopped at the farm where they were picking up the hams. Hams! And they had some meals there and spent the night and loaded up their wagon with salted hams. The farmer there was pretty nice. They also asked about Brill, and that's when they confirmed that Brill had been around asking about a young boy and an old man. So... why don't we get right into chapter 9? Let's see how long this chapter is. It's not that long. We've got time to get through it. It only goes to page 118, so 10 pages. Not even 10 full pages. Here we go. You ready, Dino? Chapter 9. The almost 2 weeks it took them to reach Muros were the most uncomfortable Garion had ever spent. Their route skirted the edge of the foothills through rolling and sparsely settled country, and the sky hung gray and cold overhead. There were occasional spits of snow, we know what that's like, and the mountains loomed black against the skyline to the east. It seemed to Garion that he would never be warm again. Despite Durnik's best efforts to find dry firewood each night, their fires always seemed pitifully small, and the great cold around them enormously large. The ground upon which they slept was always frozen, and the chill seemed actually to seep in Garion's bones. His education in the Drasnian secret language continued, and he became, if not adept, at least competent, by the time they passed Lake Kamar and began the long downhill grade that led to Muros. The city of Muros, in south-central Sandaria, was a sprawling, unattractive place that had been, since time immemorial, the site of a great annual fair. Each year in late summer, Algar horsemen drove vast cattle herds through the mountains along the Great North Road to Muros, where cattle buyers from all over the west gathered to await their coming. Huge sums changed hands, and, because the Algar clansmen also commonly made their yearly purchases of useful and ornamental articles at that time, merchants from as far away as Nyissa in the remote south gathered to offer their wares. A large plain which lay to the east of the city was given over entirely to the cattle pens that stretched for miles, but were still inadequate to contain the herds which arrived at the height of the season. Beyond the pens to the east lay the more or less permanent encampment of the Algars. It's kind of a neat description, this massive market fair. That's cool. I like that. And I like the reasoning given for it. I don't know, I like the history there. I like that bit of writing. It was to this city one mid-morning at the tag end of the fair, when the cattle pens were nearly empty and most of the Algars had departed, and only the most desperate merchants remained, that Silk led the 3 wagons laden with the hams of Mingan the Tolnedran. Excuse me. The delivery of the hams took place without incident, and the wagons soon drew into an inn-yard near the northern outskirts of the city. "This is a respectable inn, great lady," Silk assured Aunt Pole as he helped her down from the wagons. "I've stopped here before." I'm drawing a blank on my Aunt Pole voice. "Let's hope so," she said. "The inns of Muros have an unsavory reputation." Does that sound right? Did I get that right? "Those particular inns lie along the eastern edge of town," Silk assured her delicately. "I know them well." "I'm certain you do," she said with an arched eyebrow. "My profession sometimes requires me to seek out places I might otherwise prefer to avoid," he said blandly. I don't know if I delivered that blandly or not. Sharky say, "Now I'm thinking of Muros like a medieval Las Vegas during a big convention." Well, except that Muros is a market. Is Las Vegas known for its commerce? But I suppose, a big party, maybe. The inn, Garion noted, was surprisingly clean, and its guests seemed for the most part to be Sendarian merchants. "I thought there'd be many different kinds of people here in Muros," he said as he and Silk carried their bundles up to the chambers on the second floor. "There are," Silk said, "but each group tends to remain aloof from the others. The Tolnedrans gather in one part of town, the Drasnians in another, the Nyissans in yet another. The Earl of Muros prefers it that way. Tempers sometimes flare in the heat of the day's business, and it's best not to have natural enemies housed under the same roof." Farmo says, "Now this is our sugar dates and figs town. Sugar dates and pistachios!" Garion nodded. "You know," he said as they entered the chambers they had taken for their stay in Muros, "I don't think I've ever seen a Nyissan." "You're lucky," Silk said with distaste. "They're an unpleasant race." Silk. "Are they like the Murgos?" "No," Silk said. "The Nyissans worship Issa, the snake god, and it's considered seemly among them to adopt the mannerisms of the serpent. I don't find it at all attractive myself. Besides, the Nyissans murdered the Riven king, and all Alorns have disliked them since then." "The Revens don't have a king," Garion objected. "Not anymore," Silk said. "They did once, though, until Queen Salmisra decided to have him murdered When was that? Garion asked, fascinated. 1,300 years ago, Silk said, as if it had only been yesterday. Isn't that sort of a long time to hold a grudge? Garion asked. Some things are unforgivable, Silk said shortly. Since there was still a good part of the day left, Silk and Wolf left the inn that afternoon to search the streets of Muros for those strange, lingering traces that Wolf could apparently see or feel, and which would tell him whether the object they sought had passed this way. Garion sat near the fire in the chamber he shared with Aunt Pole, trying to bake the chill out of his feet. I know that feeling. I usually get in a hot bath for that. Aunt Pole also sat by the fire, mending one of his tunics, her shining needle flickering in and out of the fabric. Who was the Revan king, Aunt Pole? He asked her. She stopped sewing. Why do you ask? She said. Silk was telling me about the Niesens, he said. He told me that their king murdered the Revan king. He told me that their queen murdered the Revan king. Why would she do that? You're full of questions today, aren't you? She asked, her needle moving again. Silk and I talk about a lot of things as we ride along, Garion said, pushing his feet even closer to the fire. Don't burn your shoes, she told him. Silk says that I'm not a Cendar, Garion said. He says that he doesn't know what I am, but that I'm not a Cendar. Silk talks too much, Aunt Pole observed. You never tell me anything, Aunt Pole, he said in irritation. I tell you everything you need to know, she said calmly. Right now, it's not necessary for you to know anything about Revan kings or Nissen queens. All you want to do is keep me an ignorant child, Garion said petulantly. I'm almost a man, and I don't even know what I am. Or who. I know who you are, she said, not looking up. Who am I, then? You're a young man who's about to catch his shoes on fire, she said. He jerked his feet back quickly. You didn't answer me, he accused. That's right, she said in that infuriatingly calm voice. Why not? It's not necessary for you to know yet. When it's time, I'll tell you, but not until. Sharky say, and petulant arguments always work. That's not fair, he objected. The world's full of injustice, she said. Now, since you're feeling so manly, why don't you fetch some more firewood? That'll give you something useful to think about. He glared at her and stamped across the room. Garion, she said. What? Don't even think about slamming the door. She's very wise. That is definitely what was coming next. Sharky say, motherly power move. That evening, when Wolf and Silk returned, the usually cheerful old man seemed impatient and irritable. He sat down at the table in the common room of the inn and stared moodily at the fire. I don't think it passed this way, he said finally. There are a few places left to try, but I'm almost certain that it hasn't been here. Then we go on to Kamar, Barak rumbled, his thick fingers combing his bristling beard. "We must," Wolf said. "Most likely we should have gone there first." "There was no way to know," Aunt Pole told him. "Why would he go to Kamar if he's trying to carry it to the Angarak kingdoms?" "I can't even be certain where he's going," Wolf said irritably. "Maybe he wants to keep the thing for himself. He's always coveted it." He stared into the fire again. "We are going to need some kind of freight for the trip to Kamar," Silk said. Wolf shook his head. "It slows us too much," he said. "It's not unusual for wagons to return to Kamar from Muros without freight, and it's reaching the point where we'll have to gamble our disguise for the sake of speed. It's 40 leagues to Kamar, and the weather's turning bad. A heavy snowstorm could stop the wagons entirely, and I don't have time to spend the whole winter mired down in a snowbank." Durnik dropped his knife suddenly and started to scramble to his feet. "What's amiss?" I wasn't quite right. Barrack asked quickly. Interestingly, your edition says cargo instead of freight. Oh yeah, mine definitely says we're going to need some kind of freight for the trip to Kamar. Huh. I wonder if that's a regional difference then between the books. I wonder if that's a strange change. I wonder why that would be. Mine might be a Canadian printing. It says manufactured in the United States of America, but it says that it was it says published in the United States by Del Rey Books, and I've got the Del Rey. Mine's Del Rey. Do you know is yours say Del Rey on it? Because mine says published in the United States by Del Rey Books, and simultaneously in Canada by Random House of Canada Limited, Toronto. So I guess I've got the American version. I've noticed a couple of different wording changes, but none as clearly as this. Huh. I wonder what specifically led to that. Yours is Del Rey, 1982. Weird, because I'm pretty sure that's what mine is. I don't know if mine's first edition. It says the first edition was 1982. I think that's what this is. Weird. They're the same year, they're both Del Rey. Reprint 1990. So is yours from 1990? I'm not 100% certain, but I think mine might be a 1982 printing. What's the, yeah, because it wouldn't say, if it says 1990 in your book, oh wait. No, mine cannot be 1982, because in the About the Author at the end, it mentions that Eddings died in 2009. So there's no way that my book knows that if it was printed in 1982. Anyways, yes, so why did Durnik jump up? I'm sorry, I just was very interested in that. But yes, mine was definitely printed later than 1982, which, this copy that I'm holding does not feel very old. All right. Durnik dropped his knife suddenly and started to scramble to his feet. "What's amiss?" Barrack asked quickly. "I just saw Brill," Durnik said. "He was in that doorway." "Are you sure?" Wolf demanded. "I know him," Durnik said grimly. "It was Brill, all right." Silk pounded his fist down on the table. "Idiot!" he accused himself. "I underestimated the man." That doesn't matter now, Wolf said, and there was almost a kind of relief in his voice. Our disguise is useless now, and I think it's time for speed. I'll see to the wagons, Durnik said. No, Wolf said. The wagons are too slow. We'll go to the camp of the Algars and buy good horses. He stood up quickly. What of the wagons? Durnik persisted. Forget them, Wolf said. They're only a hindrance now. We'll ride the wagon horses to the camp of the Algars and take only what we can conveniently carry. Let's get ready to leave immediately. Meet me in the inn-yard as soon as you can. He went quickly to the door and out into the cold night. It was only a few minutes later that they all met near the door to the stable in the cobblestoned inn-yard, each carrying a small bundle. Hulking Barak jingled as he walked, and Garion could smell the oiled steel of his mail shirt. A few flakes of snow drifted down through the frosty air and settled like tiny feathers to the frozen ground. Durnik was the last to join them. He came breathlessly out of the inn and pressed a small handful of coins upon Mr. Wolf. It was the best I could do, he apologized. It's scarce half the worth of the wagons, but the innkeeper sensed my haste and bargained meanly. He shrugged then. At least we're rid of them, he said. It's not good to leave things of value behind. They nag at the mind and distract one from the business at hand. Silk laughed. Durnik, he said, you're the absolute soul of a Sendar. I love that bit. Farmos remembers me buying. Yeah, I definitely had a much older copy of the books. One must follow one's nature, Durnik said. Thank you, my friend, Wolf said gravely, dropping the coins in his purse. Let's lead the horses, he went on. Galloping through these narrow streets at night would only attract attention. I'll lead, Barak announced, drawing his sword. If there's any trouble, I'm best equipped to deal with it. I'll walk along beside you, friend Barak, Durnik said, hefting a stout cudgel of firewood. Barak nodded, his eyes grimly bright, and led his horse out through the gate with Durnik closely at his side. Taking his lead from Durnik, Garion paused momentarily as he passed the woodpile and selected a good oak stick. It had a comforting weight, and he swung it a few times to get the feel of it. Then he saw Aunt Pole watching him, and he hurried on without any further display. The streets through which they passed were narrow and dark, and the snow had begun to fall a bit more heavily now, settling almost lazily through the dead calm air. The horses, made skittish by the snow, seemed to be fearful and crowded close to those who led them. When the attack came, it was unexpected and swift. There was a sudden rush of footsteps and a sharp ring of steel on steel as Barak fended off the first blow with his sword. Garion could see only shadowy figures outlined against the falling snow, and then, as once before, when in his boyhood he had struck down his friend Runderig in mock battle, his ears began to ring, his blood surged boilingly in his veins as he leaped into the fight, ignoring the single cry from Aunt Pole. He received a smart rap on the shoulder, whirled, and struck with his stick. He was rewarded with a muffled grunt. He struck again, and then again, swinging his club at those parts of his shadowy enemy which he instinctively knew were most sensitive. The main fight, however, surged around Barak and Durnik. The ring of Barak's sword and the thump of Durnik's cudgel resounded in the narrow street, along with the groans of their assailants. "There's the boy!" a voice rang out behind them, and Garion whirled. 2 men were running down the street toward him, one with a sword and the other with a wicked-looking curved knife. Knowing it was hopeless, Garion raised his club, but Silk was there. The small man launched himself from the shadows directly at the feet of the two, and all three crashed to the street in a tangle of arms and legs. Silk rolled to his feet like a cat, spun, and kicked one of the floundering men solidly just below the ear. The man sank twitching to the cobblestones. The other scrambled away and half rose, just in time to receive both of Silk's heels in his face, as the rat-faced Drasnian leaped into the air, twisted, and struck with both legs. Then Silk turned, almost casually. "Are you all right?" he asked Garion. "I'm fine," Garion said. "You're awfully good at this kind of thing." "I'm an acrobat," Silk said. "It's simple once you know how." "They're getting away," Garion told him. Silk turned, but the two he had just put down were dragging themselves into a dark alley. There was a triumphant shout from Barak, and Garion saw that the rest of the attackers were fleeing. At the end of the street, in the snow-speckled light from a small window, was Brill, almost dancing with fury. "Cowards!" he shouted at his hirelings. "Cowards!" And then Barak started for him, and he too turned and ran. "Are you all right, Aunt Pole?" Garion said, crossing the street to where she stood. "Of course I am," she snapped. "And don't do that again, young man. Leave street brawling to those better suited for it." "I was all right," he objected. "I had my stick here." "Don't argue with me," she said. "I didn't go to all the trouble of raising you to have you end up dead in a gutter." "Is everyone all right?" Durnik asked anxiously, coming back to them. "Of course we are," Aunt Pole snapped peevishly. "Why don't you see if you can help the old wolf with the horses?" "Certainly, Mistress Pole," Durnik said, mildly.
"A splendid little fight,"
Barak said, wiping his sword as he joined them.
"Not much blood, but satisfying all the same."
"I'm delighted you found it so," Aunt Pole said acidly. "I don't much care for such encounters. Did they leave anyone behind?"
Regrettably no, dear lady," Barak said. "The quarters were too narrow for good strokes, and these stones too slippery for good footing. I marked a couple of them quite well, however. We managed to break a few bones and dent a head or two. As a group, they were much better at running than fighting."
Silk came back from the alley where he had pursued the two who had tried to attack Garion. His eyes were bright, and his grin was vicious. "Invigorating," he said, and then laughed for no apparent reason. Wolf and Durnik had managed to calm their wild-eyed horses, and led them back to where Garion and the others stood.
"Is anyone hurt?"
Wolf demanded.
"We're all intact," Barak rumbled. "The business was hardly worth drawing a sword for."
Garion's mind was racing. In his excitement, he spoke without stopping to consider the fact that it might be wiser to think the whole thing through first. "How did Brill know we were in Muros?" he asked. Silk looked at him sharply, his eyes narrowing. "Perhaps he followed us from Winold," he said. "But we stopped and looked back," Garion said. "He wasn't following when we left, and we've kept a watch behind us every day." Silk frowned. "Go on, Garion," he said. "I think he knew where we were going," Garion blurted, struggling against a strange compulsion not to speak what his mind saw clearly now.
"And what else do you think?"
Wolf asked. "Somebody told him," Garion said. "Somebody who knew we were coming here." "Mingan knew," Silk said, "but Mingan's a merchant, and he wouldn't talk about his dealings to somebody like Brill." But Asherak the Murgo was in Mingan's counting room when Mingan hired us. This compulsion was so strong now that Garion's tongue felt stiff. Silk shrugged. Why should it concern him? Asherak didn't know who we were. But what if he did? Garion struggled. What if he isn't just an ordinary Murgo, but one of those others? Like the one who was with those ones who passed us a couple of days after we left Durnik. A Grolim? Silk said. His eyes widened. Yes, I suppose that if Asherak's a Grolim, he'd have known who we are and what we're doing. And what if the Grolim who passed us that day was Asherak? Garion fought to say. What if he wasn't really looking for us, but just coming south to find Brill and send him here to wait for us? Silk looked very hard at Garion. Very good, he said softly. Very, very good. He glanced at Aunt Pole. My compliments, Mistress Pole. You've raised a rare boy here. What did this Asherak look like? Wolf asked quickly. A Murgo, Silk shrugged. He said he was from Rakgoska. I took him to be an ordinary spy on some business that didn't concern us. My mind seems to have gone to sleep. It happens when one deals with Grolims, Wolf told him. Someone's watching us, Durnik said quietly, from that window up there. Garion looked up quickly and saw a dark shape at a second-story window outlined by a dim light. The shape was hauntingly familiar. Mr. Wolf did not look up, but his face turned blank as if he were looking inward, or his mind were searching for something. Then he drew himself up and looked at the figure in the window, his eyes blazing. A Grolim, he said shortly. A dead one, perhaps, Silk said. He reached inside his tunic and drew out a long, needle-pointed dirk. He took 2 quick steps away from the house where the Grolim stood watching, spun, and threw the dirk with a smooth, overhand cast. The dirk crashed through the window. There was a muffled shout, and the light went out. Garion felt a strange pang in his left arm. Marked him, Silk said, with a grin.
Good throw,
Barak said admiringly. One has picked up certain skills, Silk said modestly. If it was Asherak, I owed him that for deceiving me in Mingan's counting room.
At least it'll give him something to think about, Wolf said. There's no point in trying to creep through town now. They know we're here. Let's mount and ride.
He climbed onto his horse and led the way down the street at a quick walk. The compulsion was gone now, and Garion wanted to tell them about Asherak, but there was no chance for that as they rode. Excuse me. The Sharkies say, an ordinary spy supports my proposal that those who know that all Murgos out of their country are actually spies on state business, but the common folk don't know that. Yeah, that's... Was it Mr. Wolf? Either Mr. Wolf or Silk said something similar. I think Mr. Wolf in the first time they went to Upper Gralt, I think said that if you just assumed that all Murgos were spies, you wouldn't be too far off the mark. I think that's right. But, yes, definitely that is not known by everybody. I think many people think, they're merchants because that's a common disguise that they use. But, yes, I think you're right. Once they reached the outskirts of the city, they nudged their horses into a fast canter. The snow was falling more seriously now, and the hoof-churned ground in the vast cattle pens was already faintly dusted with white. "It's going to be a cold night," Silk shouted as they rode.
"We could always go back to Muros," Barak suggested. "Another scuffle or two might warm your blood."
Silk laughed and put his heels to his horse again. The encampment of the Algars was 3 leagues to the east of Muros. It was a large area surrounded by a stout palisade of poles set in the ground. The snow by now was falling thickly enough to make the camp look hazy and indistinct. The gate, flanked by hissing torches, was guarded by 2 fierce-looking warriors in leather leggings, snow-dusted jerkins of the same material, and pot-shaped steel helmets. The points of their lances glittered in the torchlight.
"Halt!"
one of the warriors commanded, leveling his lance at Mr. Wolf.
"What business have you here at this time of night?"
"I have an urgent need of speaking with your herd master," Wolf replied politely. "May I step down?"
The 2 guards spoke together briefly.
"You may come down," one of them said. "Your companions, however, must withdraw somewhat, but not beyond the light."
"Algars," Silk muttered under his breath. "Always suspicious." Mr. Wolf climbed down from my book says this horse, but I think it means his horse. Mr. Wolf climbed down from his horse and, throwing back his hood, approached the 2 guards through the snow. Then a strange thing happened. The elder of the 2 guards stared at Mr. Wolf, taking in his silver hair and beard. His eyes suddenly opened very wide. He quickly muttered something to his companion, and the 2 men bowed deeply to Wolf.
"There isn't time for that," Wolf said in annoyance. "Convey me to your herd master."
"At once, Ancient One,"
the elder guard said quickly, and hurried to open the gate. "What was that about?" Garion whispered to Aunt Pole. "Algars are superstitious," she said shortly. "Don't ask so many questions." They waited with snow settling down about them and melting on their horses. After about a half hour, the gate opened again, and 24 mounted Algars, fierce in their rivet-studded leather vests and steel helmets, herded 6 saddled horses out into the snow. Behind them Mr. Wolf walked, accompanied by a tall man with his head shaved, except for a flowing scalp lock. I think that means his head is shaved, except at the back there's like a long bit of hair. That's how I've always pictured it. Kind of like Zuko had something similar for a while in Avatar, The Last Airbender, right? That's kind of what I've always pictured for the Algar scalp lock.
"You have honored our camp by your visit, Ancient One," the tall man was saying, "and I wish you all speed on your journey."
"I have little fear of being delayed with Algar horses under us," Wolf replied.
"My riders will accompany you along a route they know, which will put you on the far side of Muros within a few hours," the tall man said. "They will then linger for a time to be certain you are not followed."
"I cannot express my gratitude, noble herd master," Wolf said, bowing.
"It is I who am grateful for the opportunity to be of service," the herd master said, also bowing.
The change to their new horses took only a minute. With half of their contingent of Algars leading, and the other half bringing up the rear, they turned and rode back toward the west through the dark, snowy night. And that brings us to the end of chapter 9 and nearly 8:30. So, definitely a good place to stop on we finished page 118. We're going to 119 in chapter 10. Oh. More interesting things. I feel like the developments are coming quite quite a bit faster all of a sudden in the past few chapters. The bit about Ashrak and the compulsion on Garion, that's the first time I think it's really been firmly established as a compulsion. In the past, Garion's just kind of thought of it as a private thing between the two of them. Like, it wouldn't really be right to share it with others. But now we're getting the idea that maybe that idea was planted in his head. Especially once Ashrak got tagged with the dagger, and then suddenly that compulsion was gone. So, that's pretty interesting. And a little ominous. And then we've got that bit with Mr. Wolf and the Algars. I don't know, maybe they really respect their elders. Sharky say it was interesting as he wrestled with trying to talk about it. Yeah, it seemed like he was trying to talk around it. You know, what if someone was sending Brill, one of the Murgos? Oh, okay, well, no. Or what if somebody told him about it? Well, nobody would have known except for Mingan. There was also Ashrak. What if Ashrak wasn't a normal Murgo? Yeah, that was definitely an interesting bit. The like talking in questions and kind of fighting that was definitely an interesting bit of writing. What if he was also the one that passed us that day? What if he was doing a different... What if he was going to talk to Brill? Yeah, he never completely completes the thoughts, Sharkies say, but knows the adults well. I also appreciate that Silk and Mr. Wolf stop and listen to Garion. I feel like in a lot of writing, you know, the adults would have just brushed off what Garion was saying because he's just a child. But I appreciate that Silk is sitting here going, hey, Garion is noticing something that I missed. And Mr. Wolf takes them both seriously and asks questions, you know, to clarify. That kind of reminds me of... That's something that I like about... This is a weird tangent, but that's something I like about Star Trek, especially, like, specifically in Next Generation, is whenever somebody on the crew goes, hey, something weird just happens, they will usually go and tell the other people on the other crew members that something has happened. They don't just brush it off as a dream or whatever. And then the other crew members will take them seriously and go, okay, if that happened, what could it have been? That's something that I like about that show, that there's clear communication and that people take each other seriously. And that's something, again, that's something I like about this part of the book. Garion puts out this idea and the others listen and take him seriously and actually, you know, accept what he's saying. I really appreciate that. Because I definitely feel like there are other bits of media, you know, where people would just ignore what he's got to say. Other bits of writing or whatever. And we've got Aunt Pole keeping information from Garion as usual, unfortunately. He sent me a picture of the page in the back of your book. See, let me see if I've got that. I'm curious. That page actually looks kind of familiar, but I don't have it in this edition. I've got some websites, including a Facebook and Twitter page, so definitely not an original printing. Where does it say the year? Shouldn't it say somewhere what year this one was printed? I don't actually see anything quite like that, unfortunately. Just weird. Thought. There's also a quote by Piers Anthony on the back. Ugh. I enjoyed Piers Anthony books when I was younger, like in middle and high school. Mostly, I think middle school. I really enjoyed the Xanth books, but looking back on them, I don't have a lot of respect for that particular author anymore. There's just a lot of things wrong with his writing. Erica and I have talked about that before. But we're getting kind of late here. It's past 8:30. So, and I'm actually quite hungry. I started to get hungry just before the stream. I was doing a charity stream, which I think will raid out. Yes, I need to eat. I think we'll raid out to a charity stream that a friend of mine is doing for. I forget if it's for Child's Play. It's something similar to that type of charity. Erica says, I cringe so hard looking back. Yeah, me too. I mean, we didn't know better, and it was interesting, funny writing that was aimed at our age group and demographic. So I don't feel bad for having read the books. And also, I was less educated on Extra Life. Yes, that's what it was. She's doing a charity stream for Extra Life. I still do want to read like the first couple Xanth books with you, Erica. I think that was going to be fun, just as a let's look at how awful these books actually were. Let me just get the correct link. Okay, so I'll set up that raid. If anybody wants to go check it out, they're basically just playing board games and Tabletop Simulator. And trying to raise money for Extra Life, which I think is a children's charity. That should be it. So yeah, I'm planning on doing this again on the 31st on New Year's. So, feel free to hang out for me for a little bit on New Year's Eve. Yeah, I'll bring some of them. I'll bring a couple of them with me, Erica. But yes, I am going to do this on New Year's Eve. Not close to midnight or anything like that, but I'll start up at my normal 7 o'clock. So hopefully I'll see everybody then. But until then, have a good night, and Merry Christmas and Happy New Year's, and hopefully I'll see you on New Year's Eve. And, we'll just hang out and maybe we'll read. We'll see what everyone wants to do then. Okay. Good night. You don't think? We'll talk in between. Bye.